All right. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's time. My name is Matt from Public Sector Personnel Consultants. Just wanted to put together an overview for everybody to highlight the upcoming classification and compensation study and your opportunities to participate. So we'll spend probably 25 or 30 minutes together. I'll try to move fairly quickly through the slides, give you a little bit of a background on our firm, certainly highlight the major project phases, and then point in a couple of directions. One, the market study, what that will look like. So I've got a few notes on that. And then I have screenshots of a job questionnaire that we want to invite everybody to be working on over the next couple of weeks. So you'll see that. And I'll try to kind of illustrate page by page just a few tips and notes. As our name suggests, this is all that we do. Public Sector Personnel Consultants conducts classification and compensation studies for cities, counties, school districts, colleges, universities, K-12 schools throughout the United States. Home base for some of us is Arizona. We have staff right in Colton. We've done work just over the last 6 months with some of your neighbors anyway, San Bernardino, Colton, Riverside. We're doing work in Norco now, out in Huntington Beach and Escondido. Ventura, I believe, will get started up here in the next couple of weeks. Worked with just over 400 cities throughout the United States, but I think all that experience just qualifies us to ask good questions around what impacts your city's ability to recruit and to retain staff. What jobs exist, what belongs on job descriptions, how is work allocated to different job titles and job descriptions. So you'll have an opportunity to answer some of those questions for us as well. A couple of highlights, I think, to not to start off with the negative with the word "not," but I want to make sure that it's clear to everybody. This isn't a staffing review. It is not a performance review. We are just trying to study your job and determine its fair market value. This is something that the city would like to do for you, not to you. Very important distinction. It does not replace budgeting. It does not replace bargaining. Anything that was already bargained or you would anticipate as being part of the regular budgeting process typically does not go away, through a study like this. Nor is it the means typically by which everyone sees a raise. Oftentimes when you do a survey, the results, vary job by job by job. So we'll have to work with the city on how to implement, and affect any change and how the data that we collect might be utilized for bargaining and or for budgeting. So just a couple of important notes on that page that I wanted to make sure that we pointed out. The project itself will take a good 4 to 5 months, maybe 6 months on the outside, and really can be broken down into 2 major phases. Classification, which is the study of jobs, the review of job descriptions, ensuring that your job title is an accurate reflection of what you do, is kind of phase 1. You'll have an opportunity to review your job description and or complete a job questionnaire. Ideally, we would hear from everybody, either individually or as part of a group, through this questionnaire. There are well over 100 job titles and job descriptions currently in your system. So we like to ask kind of some general questions first. Obviously, does your job title make sense? Does your job description accurately reflect your duties and your responsibilities? If we have multiple people in the same job title but performing different job duties, does that warrant breaking one job title out into 2 or more different job descriptions? Really, our only goal there is to get it right, and that's simply to ensure that when we do a salary survey and a total compensation survey, we're making comparisons based on what you actually do and not just based solely on your job title. The PAQ, the position analysis questionnaire, is what I do have screenshots of here coming up in a couple of slides. And it is really a walkthrough of and an opportunity for you to write down what you do. It's an opportunity to take that content and update a job description. So we'll be working on that. Again, you can work on them either individually or as part of a group. So if you share your job duties with several other employees, you are more than welcome to work on them as a group and turn in one questionnaire. You'll have some time to work on those over the next several weeks. Nobody will change what you put on the questionnaires. And then, like I said, I have a walkthrough of those here coming up in just a couple of slides. We will be doing a salary and a benefits survey. We typically tend to do those from scratch. Remember, I said you've got well over 100 job descriptions and job titles in your system. We will frankly try to survey every single job. We might not be able to. You might have some jobs that are a little bit unique, or jobs that we have to be very intentional about where we go to get data. Maybe some specialized electric utility positions, or if you had other services that maybe neighboring cities do not. Sometimes you have to be really intentional about going to specific other agencies to find market data. We build out from scratch a salary survey database. We will interact with the other survey cities and collect their job descriptions, their MOUs, their pay plans. We will hit them up with a little bit of survey questionnaire, really kind of tailored around Banning's job titles and job descriptions. That is kind of mission number one of phase two. Phase two is really survey. What is the job worth? And then how do we articulate that onto a pay plan? So succinctly, or maybe not succinctly, phase one, what are the jobs, job titles, job descriptions? Phase two, part of it is going to be a salary survey, a total compensation survey that is intended to answer these two questions up on the screen. One, how do we look? Where are we? How do we compete with those that are around us and that have jobs like ours? Right behind that is where do we want to be, making very informed decisions about pay strategy, about pay ranges, total compensation philosophies. That becomes a little bit of a policy or a philosophical discussion with your council and their designees. And again, it doesn't replace the bargaining process either. I grabbed a couple of screenshots out of your existing MOUs so that we had a chance to at least flash up on the screen the who part. Generally, a big popular question is, well, who are you going to compare me to? What jobs, what cities, what other employers are you going to compare my jobs to? When I look at the MOUs that are currently in place at the city of Banning, there is a mix, there is some overlap. So I've just kind of grabbed a couple of screenshots from the various MOUs that did speak specifically to survey comparison agencies. I think it's a mix of nearby neighbors, maybe kind of up and down either the I-10 corridor. There are some utility districts. There are some electric utility providers. There are some municipalities that have electrical utility jobs. So you can kind of see, like this one, for example, is out of the management MOU. It gives us a little bit of insight, but there is some overlap into some of the other bargaining agreements and their comparison agencies. So there are some things in common across some of these job groups. Out of the IBEW utilities MOU, you'll recall from the management one slide back, some of these cities also were on that list. So everything that I'm showing you, at least it's not 20 or 30 different comparators. There are some commonalities where we'll have the opportunity to compare jobs to the same agencies, regardless of management, non-management, various utilities, general employees, that kind of thing. So there's some overlap there. That's the IBEW utilities, and then the IBEW general. I think all of these agencies showed up on one, if not both, of the previous lists as well. I believe Human Resources also put out a copy of this PowerPoint. So if you want to look at that, certainly if we missed anything, I'd try to read through each of the MOUs just to make sure that if there was historically some agencies that were utilized for survey comparisons, that we honored those and or brought those up. So you can see the PowerPoint if you want to spend a little bit more time on the slides than I am in the presentation. As I mentioned, when we do the salary survey, one question we'll be able to answer is, where are we, right? How do we look? How do we compare? Are we in the ballpark? As an aside, if we survey 100 different jobs, usually the answer to that question varies. It's very common for us to find that we have pretty competitive pay ranges for some jobs, but perhaps we have fallen behind for others. So out of 100 jobs, maybe 30 of our jobs are competitive and 30 of our jobs are more than 5% behind market, and maybe 30 of our jobs are 102% of market, or something like that. My point there is kind of twofold. The survey itself becomes a little bit anecdotal in answering the question of how do we look. The answer is going to vary. Yeah, if some jobs are in great shape, that's fantastic. If other jobs have fallen behind, now we can have a discussion around how do we respond to that? How do we react to our survey findings to ensure that all of our jobs have a consistent relationship to market? That is typically our goal as a third party, is to be able to model out how we react to market data, modeling out pay range placements for all jobs that have a similar relationship to market. So if we say, hey, let's try and have all of our pay ranges within 5% of market or within 10% of market, we want to try and do that, at least in our modeling, and then allow for bargaining. And so, they can be looked at by pay. It can also be looked at in benefits and in total compensation. Typically, we're going to look at pension contributions, health insurance contributions, certification pay, ad pay, longevity pay, anecdotally maybe paid time off like vacation and sick and things that I can't quite, maybe add to a dollar amount, but also inform, hey, how are we doing, not just on pay, but also on benefits for all of our jobs. That piece of it is the bulk of our heavy lifting, right? So what are the jobs? Do we need to update job descriptions? What are those jobs worth? What is going on in the market? And how do we look compared to those that we're competing with? To wrap that, ultimately then is, if desired, we can model out pay range placements, salary tables, and as well as projections for, what perhaps the next 2 to 3 years might need to look like in order to either meet, catch up, or stay up with, market and market fluctuation. The PAQ process, the position analysis questionnaire, ultimately is about 4 pages, 5 pages. I don't want to intimidate anybody with the form, but I do have screenshots of it so that you have an idea of what we're looking for. You'll have a solid couple of weeks to work on the questionnaires. Human Resources was kind enough to create a fillable template so that you can complete it and then pass it on to your supervisor, and we'll try to make these as paperless as possible. Again, you can work on these as a group if you want to sit down with your coworkers over the next couple of weeks. Maybe you have some job duties in common with coworkers and you still want to fill out your own questionnaire. All of those approaches are totally acceptable. We just want everybody to have had an opportunity to review your job description and tell us about your job duties through one of these questionnaires. So you'll see our first deadline shows up here, December 15th. That is the date that we want you to turn in a questionnaire to your supervisor or to your department head. Departments will have until kind of right through the holidays in January 7th to have looked at and confirm that, hey, we heard from everybody. Let's send these on to the consultant for us to be able to do our work. So December 15th and January 7th, which will come fairly quickly. But if you need to borrow a little bit of time, certainly work amongst your departments and with your department heads to try and grab a little bit more time if you need it. The questionnaires themselves are intended to follow a job description format. The questionnaire should take about 1 to 2 hours to complete. I would encourage you to do it on city time, but I would also encourage you not to take more than 2 hours to work on it. The first page starts with some housekeeping, your name, your job title, if there's a way to get in touch with you, if you have a work email address or a work phone number, if we do have some follow-up questions. As a third party, we will be reviewing these questionnaires no less than 3 times. We read through them to confirm either classification or identify questions that we might have for job titling changes and or job description updating. We will read through them in order to affect that change on a job description. So the content that we get from these questionnaires helps us fill out or complete an updated job description for you. And then we also utilize the questionnaires, not the written job descriptions, to make the market comparisons. So when we go to these other cities and we pull their job descriptions, we're going to be looking for similar job duties, job responsibilities, maybe a little bit of similarity in minimum qualifications like education and experience. And so the questionnaires themselves, help inform, I think, the quality of everything that we're able to provide to the city through this process. So they are very, very important. The bottom of page 1 is really the kind of the top of a job description when you think about it. When somebody asks you what you do for a living, what do you tell them? What is the overall purpose of your position? I'd like to suggest that you think about who your customers are to answer this kind of high level question. It's the elevator speech when somebody asks you what you do for a living and you've only got a minute to tell them, what's your initial reaction, right? Give us kind of 2 or 3 sentences to say, hey, I'm front of the house or right on the counter, or I'm out in the field providing a direct service to those that are having business with the city, with residents, with citizens, with developers, with whoever it is. You're out there providing a direct service. Maybe you're back of house, you're behind the scenes supporting those that do have that frontline service. Maybe both. Now, we typically have a kind of a goofy disclaimer on the bottom of page 1 as well. And that is if you wear multiple hats. Not uncommon in agencies, frankly, with probably fewer than 500 employees. I've seen agencies with bigger than that, where kind of post-recession world, your employer expects you to wear multiple hats. What I mean by that is maybe you were an accountant, but you're also a help desk analyst. Those are 2 different jobs out in the market. Maybe half of your time you perform some general ledger work and you do some accounting work in finance, but the other half of the time, you're providing user support to those that utilize computer systems or utilize city systems to do their work. We might need to compare your job to more than one job out in the marketplace. And so if that's you, we don't need 2 questionnaires, but if you want to draw a line through and say, hey, job number 1, let me tell you about some job duties. And that's half of my time. Job number 2, the other half of my time is something a little bit different. Now, I'm giving goofy examples, but we've seen some very interesting blends of job duties and responsibilities that are not traditional. And I belabor it a little bit because no 2 jobs are alike out in the market. And if you do have what I'll call a / job title, where I'm an equipment operator / welder, or I'm an accountant / help desk analyst, I want to know about that. We want to make sure that anything that's non-traditional that we wouldn't expect to see on your job description, or for that matter, the job description in a comparison city, that we take that into account. Page 2 will be or should be everybody's least favorite page on the questionnaire. Page 2 is where we want you to write down the tasks that you perform while you're at work. Now, this does not need to be exhaustive. A lot of job descriptions will have either bullet points or 3 paragraphs. On this screen, there's nothing magical about telling us about 8 job duties. If you want to break your work out into 5 job duties or 25 job duties, you decide how granular you want to get. If we had the chance to really do super in-depth interviewing with everybody, we're going to ask 2 questions. What do you feel are the most important job duties that you perform? And right behind that, what are the most frequently performed job duties that are assigned to you? So maybe start on a separate piece of paper. I would say if there are tasks that you perform every day, write them down and label them as such, regularly, daily. We greet customers, we prioritize our work, we respond to work orders, and kind of keep up with just the general customer demand. That could be a daily task. There might be some tasks that you perform less frequently, but you believe are important and belong on your job description. If you want to get this to add up to 100% of your time, that's fine. If you're not, you can bounce around, just label it to say, hey, weekly or monthly or quarterly. We might have to do some reporting. It's not as frequent, but it's very important that we get these quarterly reports done. That might be 5% of your time, right? Compared to, multitasking where I'm 50% of my time, I'm either interacting with customers or I'm looking at emails or I'm working on a project. So you decide how you want to organize your thoughts onto this page. If you want to look at your current job description, feel free to do so. You will notice or should notice on a lot of good job descriptions, a pretty active voice describing tasks, functions, actions that you're taking or that you're performing. I would also say if there is work that comes to your desk and you're doing something to it or you're doing something with it and it leaves your desk changed, tell us about that. Are you, receiving and screening applications for permits? Are you processing those? Are you confirming that all the information is complete and accurate so that you can pass it along for a final signature? Just kind of give us an idea if you want to use a fairly active voice. I would just say don't feel the need to copy and paste from your current job description, because we will have those as well. But if you want to say see attached, or you want to mark up a current job description, however you want to do that is totally fine. If you work on this as a group and you want to kind of get your thoughts organized and then have one person type it up, that's also a pretty productive way to fill out a group questionnaire. It gets more straightforward from here. The top of page 3, knowledge, skills, and sources of information. If we have successfully written down tasks that we perform, duties that we perform, what do you have to know and what do you have to be good at in order to perform these job duties? Could be computer skills, could be customer service skills, presentation skills, writing skills, maybe time management, could be knowledge of specialized accounting software, knowledge and skill in setting up a traffic safety area around a work site, skill in operating a piece of equipment, skill in resolving customer complaints. So that's kind of knowledge and skills. Give that some thought. That's kind of a fun section, because when you stop and think about what you are applying to perform these job duties we just wrote down, you'll probably be able to think of quite a few kind of knowledge of and skill in. The other piece here is if there are information sources that you reference on a regular basis. If there's a procedure manual, an owner manual, or an operating manual or repair manual for a specialized piece of equipment, if there are statutes or ordinances that you're constantly referencing, give us an idea of any of those, so that we can kind of get an understanding of, hey, I'm interpreting something, or I'm pulling information from something and I'm applying what I know from that. The bottom of page 3, let's say that you are promoted, and before you're able to take that promotion, we want you to sit in on an interview to help us find your replacement. What do you look for on somebody's resume or job application that would suggest that they could learn how to perform these job duties? They're not going to be as proficient in it. We're not going to classify you out of your job. If you say, hey, I've got a high school diploma, but I've been doing it for 20 years, and anybody new to this job should really have a 2-year degree or some formalized training or a 4-year degree. Nobody's going backwards here. But the idea is to kind of get an idea of what should we put on a job posting, or what did you have when you took the position? If you're now successfully performing these job duties, what are the requirements for those jobs? Does it require a high school diploma and 2 years of experience, maybe some specialized training or vocational training or technical training? List that out. And if your job requires some previous experience, give us an idea of how many years of previous experience should be, or what you feel should be required. The top of page 4, are there any licenses or certifications that are required? Do you have to have those when you apply for the job? Or those things that you can get after you've been in the job for a while? List those out. Spell out any acronyms for us. Maybe there is a certification or a license. Could be a commercial driver's license. Is that issued by California Department of Transportation? Are you a registered or certified planner or architect or engineer or anything like that? List that out there. The middle of page 4, do you get any cool toys to play with? Are you working out in the field where you're operating heavy equipment or machinery? If you want to attach an equipment list that says, hey, we have to be proficient in, or if there's a distinction between maybe light equipment, heavy equipment, we absolutely value your input and your definition of what makes a piece of equipment either complex or heavy or that kind of thing. So spell that out for us. Maybe you're out in the field and you have hand tools or survey equipment or anything like that. And then the bottom of page 4, are there any physical requirements associated with you performing your job duties? Are you expected to lift, to stand, to carry, to bend, to climb? Maybe you're doing a lot of repetitive either data entry, like 10-key data entry, or working with hand tools. Physically, if someone were to apply for this position, what do they need to physically be able to do in order to perform the job duties? One more straightforward section on the top of page 5. Do you work out of doors? Do you work around hazardous chemicals, infectious disease? Any ability or exposure to potential for harm? If you're working in utilities or you're working in electric utilities and there are hazards, in your job duties, or if you work out in the field and there's moving traffic or you're working around heavy equipment, tell us about that. It's a pretty straightforward section. We switch gears a little bit. The bottom of page 5, when you show up at work every day, how do you know what to work on? Do you have very explicit or specific instructions from your supervisor? Do they give you and kind of stick with you step by step? Probably not, but how specific or general are the work instructions that you receive? Maybe you work out in the field and you're not working in close proximity to your supervisor who's maybe back in an office. Tell us about when you do interact. Are there occasions when instructions are not provided? There's a few more questions in this section that are cut off, at least on my screenshot. But the idea is, how often you meet with your supervisor and for what purposes? Is there a way that your work quality can be measured through those interactions with your supervisor? How do you receive feedback, that kind of thing? Maybe you work on projects that take months to complete. Do you have the latitude to decide what you work on, how you work on it, when you're going to work on it, and how to complete that project over the course of multiple months? Or is it a little bit more specific and a little bit more guided than that? The top of page 6, are you making any significant decisions? Is there something that comes up in the course of your job duties that your supervisor or manager wants to be the one to sign off on a specific decision? If you are working out in the field, is there a potential liability to the city, to the safety of the traveling public, anything like that? What are the most difficult or important decisions that you're expected to make? Is there any consequence to those? Also in this section, I would say if you oversee the work of contractors, if you have a role in the budget, if you are able to purchase supplies or materials, tell us about that in this section. I think that goes well with kind of some of the decision-making questions here. And then the bottom of page 6 should be the last section for most of us. Who do you come into contact with in the course of performing your job duties? Maybe you interact with folks from other departments around the city to complete a staff report or to get information about budget or expenditures. How about outside of the city government? Citizens, residents, developers, the city next door, the county, the state? Are you interacting with law enforcement agencies that you're kind of neighbors with? So inside and outside the organization, who do you come into contact with? Make sure at this stage, if you've made it this far, and hopefully everybody can do this fairly electronically, keep a copy of it, save it to your desktop or save it somewhere so that you always keep a copy of your work. You can sign and date, depending on the fill-in, you can just type your name. I would say if you fill it out as a group, try and get everybody's name on there if possible, if that's at all possible, so that we can get that turned in. There is one more page for everybody to consider if you are responsible for others. So if you're a supervisor or a lead worker or a manager of full-time, part-time, contractors, vendors, suppliers, give us an idea of who and how many people you are responsible for. If you're overseeing the work that's being done on a pretty big contract by contractors, even just kind of give us an idea of, is this a $500,000 contract? Is this a $10 million contract? Give us an idea of kind of the size and the scope of any work that you're overseeing. And then do you have any responsibilities for other employees, such as hiring, training, approving their schedule? Maybe you don't get the final say, but your manager or department head gives your input pretty considerable weight. If this page doesn't apply, you can leave it blank or you can draw a line through it. But if you are responsible for others, just kind of a little bit of a supplemental page where we like to learn a little bit more about those leadership duties. The last page will be the only spot that will have anybody else write, type, or note anything on your questionnaire. The intent here is really to make sure that you don't forget anything. If there are tasks that you perform infrequently, or maybe you're newer to your position, let's make sure that we have another set of eyes on the questionnaire. And then your supervisor or manager will sign off and turn these into HR so that we can get them collected. Couple reminders, I think is my last here. We've got until mid-December for you to turn in a questionnaire to your supervisor. Overall, we'll be at it kind of through the spring. Hopefully we can kind of beat some of that timeline, but we'll move as quickly as we can. And then my other reminders, we are, intending to have a very transparent exercise here, a very participative one, and a very positive one. But it is the job that we're studying, not the individual. And it's very, very critical, I think, that everybody has an opportunity to at least consider the questionnaire, mark up a job description and attach that, whatever works best for everybody. And I think with that, that's about, I think, all of my slides. I'll pause there. I think we're getting to the end. I'm going to leave the recording on to the extent that anybody might be comfortable asking a question. It's always good for everybody to kind of hear everybody else's questions. So I would, even short of raising your hand, go ahead. If anybody does have any questions, I'll stay on for a minute and try and answer any questions that you might have. I can flip back through any of the slides if there was something there that you wanted to see or spend a little bit more time on. Or if you have any questions about the overall project or process, feel free. So I'll turn it to kind of open up here in case anybody has any questions.
Hey, Matt, this is Tom Miller in the electric utility.
Yes, sir.
So I have a couple positions that are transitioning from what they are today to what they need to be. Which one do you want us to do?
I like the need to be, right? I mean, to the extent that you can help them, define or, vice versa, that role. It's always so hard because you guys got to keep going, right? We're taking a picture of a moving vessel here and trying to make it as accurately as possible. But I definitely want to know, if there are a couple of positions that either don't exist already, because I think it's one thing if somebody's moving into a job that's already in the system. That's different than maybe if it's a brand new position, but to the extent that you can, kind of help them along or vice versa on content, whatever points us, I think, in the right direction to either try and find comps for it, or help along with recommendations on titling or pay range or that kind of thing. But let's go towards the is and will be rather than the what was, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What other questions come to mind?
And a question from an employee who emailed us. The person is new on their position and is not sure how, if they have any input. And it is also a new position. So how would you like to proceed?
Yeah, that's a little bit harder. Maybe they can work with their supervisor a little bit. I would say if it wasn't a new position, then we'd maybe be able to take advantage of 3 other people with the same job duties, or something like that. But it doesn't necessarily sound like that'll be the opportunity. So, I can definitely, we can help with that. I think whether, we sit down with supervisor, employee, kind of help on that questionnaire. If there's, samples of what the job or job description might look like that we could help, provide. But certainly if it's a new employee and a new job, then I think we're, maybe similar to Tom's question where, what do we want this position to be doing? And to the extent that we can help find, that out in the market for you. Okay. If we can help with that, I'd love to be able to.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions come to mind? See if I can stop the recording.